We're the melting pot for the operational forces, number one select cadre to come back and train and mentor the next generation.
Organizations need experienced experts who bring not only technical skills, but life lessons that can only be learned through years on the job. In the Special Forces Regiment, this role is filled by the Warrant Officer, the 180 Alpha.
How do they understand critical thinking? How do they look at a problem set and become the world's most adaptive problem solvers?
Warrant officers are subject matter experts in unconventional warfare, operations and intelligence fusion, and planning and execution. They also advise commanders on all aspects of special operations and are responsible for the integration of emerging technologies. To explore the unique role of the Special Forces Warrant Officer, I asked my old friend and 10 Special Forces Group alumni, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Gary Ostrander, to join me from the Special Warfare Museum at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. Chief Ostrander serves as the Command Chief Warrant Officer at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School. With over 30 years in the Army, Gary advises the Commander and Sergeant Major of SWCS on best practices for training and developing our U.S. Army Special Operations soldiers. After we defined what it takes to succeed as a Special Forces Warrant, we talked SWCS 2030, the importance of duration in assessment and selection, how technology is being integrated into training, how to create a training program that prepares people for anything, and innovation in recruiting initiatives. Take a listen, watch, or read my conversation with one of America's most experienced special operators. Then head over to our YouTube channel to watch Chief Ostrander share the lineage of America's first special forces. Unknown Heroes Behind Enemy Lines at D-Day, the story of Operation Jedburgh, is live on YouTube.
Chief Ostrander, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast. Let's talk about the role of the Special Forces Warrant Officer, because I joke with you that you've been there for 30 years, but when we really do break down the role of the Special Forces Warrant Officer, that's what we want at all levels as you go through your career from a Warrant Officer 1 all the way to a 5. The whole purpose is to add somebody into that command element who might be a little bit older and have a little bit more experience than the rest of the team who can provide that value. And I thought it would be really important to sit here and discuss it. And so I pulled the official definition of the SF Warrant Officer, and I'll throw it out here, and then I'm going to ask you what your definition is. But by definition, the Special Forces Warrant Officer is an experienced subject matter expert in unconventional warfare, operations, and intelligence fusion, planning and execution at all levels across the operational continuum. They advise commanders on all aspects of special operations and are responsible for the integration of emerging technologies. You're one of the 3 most senior warrant officers in the regiment. In your own words, what's the role of the Special Forces Warrant Officer?
Yeah, I think the definition hits at it, from a doctrinal standpoint. Key things that it identifies in there is as the subject matter expert, right? We draw our lineage as being experienced NCOs or officers that transition and become the 180 Alpha or Special Forces Warrant Officer. Understanding doctrine is key and paramount. Understanding the unconventional role in planning to be able to execute that, whether in training or in operations in support of a theater security cooperation plan. And then lastly, looking at that senior advisor to the commander, whether that be a detachment commander, a captain, a major at the company level, a lieutenant colonel at the battalion, and a colonel at the brigade or group level.
Or a general.
Or a general, and we continue on from there at nominative positions.
One of the important factors and prerequisites to be a Special Forces Warrant Officer is that you've got to be an E6 at minimum, and you have to have spent at least 36 months on a Special Forces ODA on a team. So really, when I think about it, I think about back to the warrant officers I had, and I can tell you a story about when I first got to 213, somebody thought it was a good idea to put 3 warrant officers on my team, and that's like putting, 2 captains on a team. It's never going to work. But how do you bridge the gap, and why is that experience that is defined as a prerequisite important so that you can sit there and provide that level of expertise between the enlisted team members and leaders there, the team sergeant, and your commissioned officer, your captain on a team or your battalion commander or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think everybody just needs to understand and define their roles, right? And we understand that clearly. As coming up enlisted, I was E7 before I transitioned. You understand that we'll use the unit of action, the ODA, as our starting point. The detachment commander is up and out, right? He is the one that's communicating up to the company commander and battalion commander if necessary for all operations.
If he wants to keep his job, he will.
If he wants to keep his job and he has that effective communication. The team sergeant is down and in, and he's controlling the day-to-day operations and everything. So you kind of have this squishy thing in the middle, the warrant, and the responsibility is looking long-term. So the warrant specifically focuses on those long-term planning operations and actions to be able to, we don't have to take credit, turn that concept and training plan over to the detachment commander, have him approve it, and then when it comes into 6 weeks out from execution, you're handing that down to the team sergeant to make sure he has all the resources to enable him to execute that, or empowering another NCO to be able to execute that on the detachment. Drawing from that, having experience operating down at the lower level, running day-to-day operations, it's somewhat difficult to transition into this middle role. And on that, it's just deployed in a deployed setting. You can operate in split teams when you have sufficient personnel. That responsibility for command and control in that split team lies to the assistant detachment commander or the warrant officer. And so you are sharing responsibilities in an operational setting. Obviously, detachment commander is still in charge of the mission set, but just splitting those roles and responsibilities.
Since you brought up the ODA, right, as the baseline element, I think one of the important jobs of the warrant officer, similar to team sergeant, I think they share this responsibility with the team sergeant, is the development of the team leader, of the captain who comes into the team. Because, and I think back to my team, I had Rudy Russell and I had Dave Handy, who was the warrant. Rudy was the team sergeant, and Rudy had been in 10th group for like 20 years. But I was fortunate because they both were really big on that, and they put a lot of time and effort into saying, and I guess they liked me, which helped, but saying like we're going to spend time developing this guy, developing this leader within our team. Talk about that mentoring aspect and the relationship between the warrant, the team sergeant, and the team leader, not only running the team, but in the development of the team leader.
Yeah, and so I think looking at, I've had great experiences and some not so great experiences. The mentorship role, that is at all levels. Not only just at the ODA where you're mentoring that detachment commander, that elevates up to the company commander, the battalion commander, group commander, and so forth. That is critical. They do, and most officers do rely or seek out, hey, what is Chief's opinion? What does Chief think about this plan? Whether you've put it together or you supported somebody else putting it together, you've reviewed it, the plan that's being presented. You can provide, from my lens, candid feedback. And it may be contradictory, and it's really a realistic sense of, hey, yes, I think this is executable, or no, I think somebody's pulling your leg and it's not going to be executable with the resources that are tasked and organized.
One of the terms that we kind of put on that is this effective intelligence, like this ability to think about the experiences that you've had in the past and then use those experiences to shape your decision making in the future. And I think one of the benefits of the role that the Special Forces Warrant Officer holds, because they spent time enlisted and now, Warrant Officer is a commissioned officer, and you see the other side, and you do spend time as an assistant detachment commander making decisions, especially if you're fortunate to operate in a split team environment, is you can bring that perspective because you've sat on both sides of it. And then in the absence of the team leader, there's teams who sometimes don't have a captain, and then they serve in that role. And then you're able to have a deeper set of experiences to bring that to the table and say, hey, I have an idea. Maybe it's not the best idea, but you can listen to it.
Right.
And I think there's benefit in that.
Yeah, and I think it goes along the soft truth, understanding the second, third order effects. Because everything, whether you're deployed downrange or you're executing something in training, it has second, third order effects. So are you chartered to be able to execute a mission in training? Or is that just something that you think is sexy and you want to do? And that's where the realism, the rubber meets the road, in a sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about your role here at the Special Warfare Center and School. So we had an opportunity a little bit ago to sit down with the commander, General Beaupere, and Sergeant Major Strong, and really dig into their vision for SWCS 2030. What does that mean? Where is the organization, and where is it going? And really break out the two components of it. The number one component: how are we recruiting, assessing, selecting, and training and developing the next generation, and the current generation in one of the training groups, to be the most highly capable warriors and operators that they can be. And then the other one is, how are we developing the doctrine? And how are we keeping the doctrine relevant? How are we closing the feedback loop quickly with the operational force, and then modifying and evolving how we're training to stay ahead of our adversaries in the way that we train? I'm interested from your perspective, how have you seen SWCS evolve through your career? And as we look at this SWCS 2030, why is now the time to invoke some of these changes?
Yeah, I think throughout my career, I went through the qualification course and ended up graduating in 97, class 497. Seeing it from my lens now and what we actually executed and performed, and just recent changes with modifying the qualification course or elements thereof, of putting small unit tactics back in front of the MOS phase, making those minor tweaks and adjustments to produce ultimately a better product at the end. Our mission and our job is to focus on that. What is the operational requirement? And we focus on that end product. How do we produce the best product at the end that has gone through enough, I would say, test and evaluations, not unscrutinized look at it, but test and evaluation that is codified. How do we test them on their basic skills, whether it's MOS or tactics or unconventional warfare? As we look at the transition of how SWCS is taking on its new form in 2030, I've had a chance to go out and actually look and see how the Army operates, how some of the other centers of excellence operate, and then coming back to SWCS, you kind of look internal and you're like, we're special somewhat, but why do we do things so differently? So that's allowed me to really understand General Beaupere's plan and course of action, the campaign to get after the transition and transformation.
You just talked about the duration of the training pipeline, and we know that there's the various phases. You have assessment and selection, you have the MOS phases, you have SUT, you have language, and various other kind of phases that fit in there in various spots. And yeah, they're always being, it seems, tweaked every couple of years. One's moving before another, and then inevitably they go back. And but that's all done on data, right? To try to figure out, what is the best application, if there is a best application. I think the duration of the course, though, is important. And I think because what are we evaluating for? We're looking for people who have a certain character, that's going to come forward in a moment of time in which we may or may not be able to predict, but inevitably it's going to be a difficult and unknown situation. We talked a lot with General and then also previously with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Lucas and Sergeant Major Matt Williams from 4th Battalion, who run the acute course in the MOS phases, about this VUCA environment: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That's what we're developing leaders for. But if you don't have a training pipeline that assesses people in various capacities for a long time, you can't draw out and put them in enough situations to bring all aspects of their character to bear. But that's what this organization's doing.
Yeah, it's, we try to make, whether it's the culmination exercises or the actual training, as realistic as possible. And so General Beaupere and I had an engagement just recently and talked to a few people and a few students, and that's what they indicated, is it is as realistic as possible. And they were really proud to be part of this organization. They've recently just graduated through the regimental first formation and are attending language school. But just having that, nuanced little feedback to say, yeah, I think we're still doing things right. We try to integrate technology as much as possible because that's what is going to be on the battlefield of tomorrow. And we try and make sure that our scenario in information exchange is as realistic as possible.
When you talk about technology, what technology is SWCS looking at as being paramount on the next battlefield?
Yeah, I think the ability to conduct PSYOPs within information advantage. And what that does is that leads back to our number one priority for the PSYWAR school and establishment thereof. So we're bringing in large language models and using artificial intelligence to be able to create dialogue and messages in whether print, radio, or social media, and feed that out during their culmination exercises near real time.
Wow.
Additional technology that we're looking at, obviously, as we assess the operating environments, Europe being one of them, we're trying to ingest and understand any form of robotics and autonomous systems as well. The realism of the future battlefield, where you may or may not think that you're going to be seen, more likely you will be seen by an unmanned system. So how do we defeat it? How do we react to it? And how do we, as the U.S. military, how do we employ those capabilities against our adversaries?
How do you stay up to date? Because we've seen how quickly things evolve, how quickly technology evolves. I mean, we were joking that it seems like yesterday, 10, 20 years ago. But if you think about how rapidly we evolved, I mean, if you walk through the museum here and you go back to, it seems like we were just in Iraq, and you go back and you look at the pictures of the kit and the gear and everything from Iraq, you're like, whoa, that looks like we used to look at pictures of like Vietnam. Yeah. And you look at the picture and the stuff from Vietnam, and that's like prehistoric now. How do you continuously stay ahead of the curve in terms of understanding the technological advantage, the information warfare, the psychological operations to be able to integrate that quickly and rapidly evolve?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits to the Special Warfare Center here is we're the melting pot for the operational forces, number one, select cadre to come back and train and mentor the next generation. We also participate in communities of interest across the joint force, not just Army, but we look from an Army ARSOF lens, we look jointly. And so including our Navy or our Air Force or Marine Corps brethren out there to bring in some of those lessons. Additional things is we try and participate in the lesson learned forums as often as possible. The CG, General Lopera, and I just, with a small team, we went to Europe and were able to visit some of the units and organizations over there dealing with the current conflict in Europe going on. And it was incredible, just great to understand, hey, what is our product that we are producing from the schoolhouse? How is it performing? How is it able to operate in various mission sets downrange?
I want to ask about the peer-to-peer fight, which is how we're defining this next let's call it adversary, or the series of adversarial nations. For 20 plus years, by and large, despite difficulty we had at times, we fought an inferior enemy when it came to technology, weaponry. I mean, they gave us a run for it a lot, but I think that's the byproduct of counterinsurgency, CT operations, prolonged operations. Our ability as a nation, as a military, to mass effects in short time at a significant volume and scale is unmatched, I believe, anywhere in the world. But we have nations, specifically, I think I'd put China first. I'd say a couple of years ago, we would all have said Russia. Maybe the Ukraine situation has shown that they may not be as capable as we thought, but still highly effective, highly capable. So there are nations out there that can have quick effect as we can. So this becomes this peer-to-peer fight. There's discussion in the media right now, and also I think within the Army, within DoD, and even in SOF, that we're in this quote unquote 1939 moment where there's these conflicts brewing across the world. Is it the start of the next global conflict? Could any one of these situations be that spark that then ignites a broader conflict? And I think we had that fear and continue to have that fear, specifically in the Middle East. The FBI is out there talking about these red lights, and these blinking lights, and what's going to happen and how can it happen? Are we going to be prepared? Are we ready to really accept it? The SOF was built, as we talk about the Jedburghs, we talk about the OSS. This was an organization that was built when we were in a peer-to-peer fight, because we identified that you need this SOF capability to degrade your peers' capability, because in the conventional fight, you could potentially hit a stalemate. And the results of that are going to be very, very nasty for civilization and society on both sides. And so when is SOF successful? SOF is successful when we avoid nation state versus nation state, superpower versus superpower, because we're actually engaging through surrogates. We're engaging through proxy groups, and then they fight it out, and it kind of keeps the nation states away from the direct conflict. When you look at these threats and the complexity of the threats and how they're different, how do you create a training program that prepares a force to be ready for anything?
Yeah, I think you need to enable, regardless of regiment that you're training, whether it's CA, it's PSYOP, or SF, you need to instill and educate how do they understand critical thinking, how do they look at a problem set and become the world's most adaptive problem solvers. I steal that quote from Colonel Matt Tucker.
Oh, I know him well. You know him well. Yeah.
Second training group and commander, but longtime 10th alumni as well. And so as he thinks about it, and we look at these regiments, we have to have realism, but really what it comes down to is mastering the basics. We receive, General Bopere, myself, CSM, we receive feedback all the time as, hey, why aren't we putting this next commo system out there? Why aren't we doing, you name it, adding whatever piece of technology and things? The challenge is, our future operating environment, we see it that we may not have those capabilities and that technology to be able to operate on. And so we have to go back to the basics. And sometimes, as you started this alluding to, is we're back in 1939. We didn't have a bunch of satellites up. So we need to understand and be able to operate off a map and compass, clear commander's intent and guidance to go out and execute our missions. And that's the same across all three tribes.
Yeah. Well, so those foundational things I think are going to be, you have to be able to do those things, and technology is an enabler. It can't be what we rely on.
Yeah, I just think there's so many younger generation, the digital age, they're far out grown in school and everything. They don't utilize all they utilize is technology. They got a smartphone for everything. They use a computer for everything. That all presents a signal, which, ultimately we have to understand that.
Yeah.
What is your signature?
Because it can be accessed. Recruiting is a top line discussion. I'd say, certainly at the DOD level in the Army, I know, USASOC for Special Forces Command is discussing it. I think there are positives in recruiting. There are still a lot of folks coming out who want to be Green Berets, want to come into the Special Forces Regiment. But there are inherent challenges in bringing people into the Army. And, SOF Army SOF represents about 1.5% when you include the National Guard into those numbers. About 1 to 1.5% of the Army sits in SOF. SOCOM only absorbs about 3% of the budget of DOD. And so when you look at the effect that these small percentages in terms of financial resources and the personnel have, we still remain critical and at the forefront of the national defense strategy. But it comes down to people, and it comes down to getting people in the door. When we look at the recruiting environment, what are some of the innovative ways that you guys are, and that the command is going out to find that next generation of SOF operator?
Yeah, we're still trying to maintain standards, and I think that's paramount. We're assessing against the SOF art attributes to identify, to bring those individuals into the SF regiment and ARSOF writ large. Innovation-wise, there's a number of a myriad of different capabilities, plans, actions that here in the headquarters as well as across the force is using to get after the recruiting effort, to include engagements, whether it be with a college focused on college athletics and trying to present the opportunities that young individuals will see if they decide to choose and take a career path within the Army. High school is also an option, but where more so what we're seeing is the younger generation is continuing on in their education. And so access to those high schools has become a little bit difficult. Any kind of professional sporting event, obviously collegiate or professional, we're trying to present those capabilities. Hey, this is ARSOF. This is a day in the life of ARSOF. In addition, we're trying to reach out to those individuals like yourself that have a large social media following and presence that can send a narrative. What does it mean to become an ARSOF operator or part of the team here in ARSOF?
Well, I think what it means is if you want to be part of the best, you better pack your shit and get out there.
Yeah,
That's what it means to me.
There's definitely that piece as well where, as I started off and said, we have not changed the standard. The standard is the standard set. And we try to publicize, whether it be on our outward-facing website or through YouTube, we try and publicize, hey, here are the minimum standards. Here's how to pack a rucksack. Get out there, get miles on your feet, get it under heavy weight and load. And we indicate what the minimum is, but we also indicate that if you show up for the minimums, there is a very slim chance that you are going to be one of the ones selected in the.
Yeah, because you got to be able to do it over and over again. That's correct. Anyone can do something once. When you look across the force, and even you look at the cadre, who's coming into SWCS to train the next generation, what I'll call the GWAT generation of operator is retiring. I just went to a retirement ceremony for a guy who was a lieutenant colonel in 7th Group. We were together. Yeah, we went to basic training together, and now he's out at the 20-year mark. And so you're seeing now guys are retiring. How's that? What effect is that having on the force, and how do we close that gap? Because there's more, the more folks who are coming into the organization don't have the combat patch. How do we close the gap?
Yeah, I think it's the experiential gap closure is I think defined through shared interest. The younger generation needs to be somewhat inquisitive of the older generation, ask a lot of questions, be able to conduct realistic training. The older generation understands what missions, whether it be GWAT based or now as we transition to peer-based competition, they understand some of those scenarios. From my lens, seeing the generations that are coming through the corps right now, hands down, they are incredibly intelligent. They're physically fit, and arriving at the operational force prepared to execute with little guidance. I think the greatest challenge right now is we have a lot of 18 X-rays straight off the street that definitely come in through assessment and selection or perform better than the active duty population. They are somewhat overwhelming the operational force, somewhere between 40 to 50% of a unit of action. And the challenge to that is they don't understand necessarily the Army. How does the Army operate? And so being able to advise 2 levels up in a deployed scenario, so an ODA is required to advise a battalion command. How do they do that? Well, oftentimes some of those individuals fall short. They don't understand those staff systems and processes of how the Army functions.
And that just takes time.
It does take time.
Time on task, time in the Army. That's interesting. What are you most excited about as you look at this next generation and you see them coming up and you speak highly of them, and you're excited to see what they're going to bring to the table in a very complex operating environment? I mean, we operate in a complex operating environment, but I think that as you look across the threats that exist today, it is extremely dynamic. And it's also very politically charged, as it always is. But whenever we're elevating from fighting terrorist organizations to being at odds with superpowers, it ups the stakes. What are you most excited about when you look at the next generation of our SOF operator?
Yeah, I think as I see them, whether it's from one qualification course to another or the RFF, just our snapshot little engagements, there's one fine thread that remains the same. And whether it's Donovan or it's Aaron Bank or anybody else, to this day, that common thread is the willingness to serve, the willingness to meet a challenge face on, and be able to adapt to that challenge to accomplish their mission. They are the generation, just like, yourself or when I went through, they're motivated. They understand they want to do by, with, and through a partner force or an ally to achieve strategic objectives. And so that common thread has woven itself even to today.
One of the most important things I believe you take away from being a Green Beret is the importance of habits. It's the importance of foundational skills. I'll tell people all the time that there's nothing special about being Special Forces. You're just like everybody else, except you do the fundamentals, you do the basics better. You do them without compromise. You do them to a defined standard, and you don't negotiate, you don't compromise on that standard. So I got one more question for you, and it's the test question. The Jedburghs of World War II had to do 3 things every day to be successful. You may have heard this. They had to shoot, they had to move, and they had to communicate. Those are foundational habits, foundational skills. What we know from training and from doing tasks, foundational tasks repetitively over time, is that the more you train them, the more they become part of your daily routine, the less you have to think about them, which means you can focus your attention on other things that may be foreseen or unforeseen. What are the 3 things that you do every day to set the conditions for success in your world, either personally or professionally?
Yeah, I think success for me, one, jokingly, knowing that you're going to ask that question.
Did your homework.
Jokingly, I get up in the morning every day, and I'm proud to be an American here, still being able to put on this uniform. But as I look at 3 things that I do, one, get up and challenge myself nearly each and every morning in that standard setting parameter of, hey, you got to do physical fitness. Secondly, be able to, if I can, engage with my family, right? Because you divorce yourself of the family when you depart for work, and sometimes it's often for long durations, but the family is who's going to support you there on the back end. So engage the family is the second one, which kind of creates clarity and defined purpose for you throughout the day. And then third is, as I look at things, I try to be myself and contribute and give back to the regiment. And that's my defining piece as to at any point in time that I'm not providing credible feedback to the regiment, that's the day that I know I need to take off this uniform and transition to the next chapter.
Get up in the morning and challenge yourself, engage with your family, and make sure that you are yourself, be yourself, and give back to the regiment. 3 great ones. And luckily you got more to give back. So I think that we have exciting opportunity ahead. People, outside of the regiment may say, what are you going to do now that we're not at war? And I argue with those people and say, well, we are at war. And you don't see it in the news anymore because it's not this direct action war that we may be in. But this time period is where SOF excels. This is where Green Berets and Special Operations Forces do their best work. This is where they prevent, as we said, the peer-to-peer competition. But it's these moments that we sit in time now where the utilization of the force is at its most critical. And I think that's an exciting opportunity. And I think that as I sit here and speak with you, speak with the commander and the sergeant major and everyone else within the Special Forces Regiment, I get more and more excited about what's on the horizon and how are we actually going to go out and seek the opportunity to do something other than direct action, but know that when called upon and if needed, we will conduct those types of activities. And I think that there's nobody better prepared. You sit here in the Special Warfare Center and School to prepare the next generation. I told you when we started, it's an honor to see you here. And I know that everybody else feels that way too. Keep up the good work and let's get those guys out there because we got a lot of work to do.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast, an official program of the Green Beret Foundation. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other long and short form content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow the Jedburgh Podcast and the Green Beret Foundation on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, or Threads. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Media Channel and the Green Beret Foundation remain committed to supporting all generations of U.S. Army Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.